Alright, back again, Luke here, and today what I want to do is tell you a little bit of some info here, maybe help you out with some sound trouble you may be having with your Midway boards. As you can see here, this is Mortal Kombat 2, although it doesn't look like it, it's kind of wrapped in bubble wrap here. But for the longest time with this board, I wasn't able to get sound, and I had thought that it was maybe the soundboard, and checked other different things, tried replacing parts, and wasn't able to get any sound from it. Lo and behold, I went on the net and I tried to look up some different wiring techniques and found one site that said that using the MVS cab, or the neo-geo cab, you could just splice in the -5 and get this thing to work. Well, although it does work, it's really temperamental, and it only works half of the time, or well, I wouldn't even say half the time, it only works some of the time. And it really does depend on how the machine wants to turn on. And I think basically most of the reason for that is because of the speaker wiring. Now, doing some research on these Midway boards, the main part about the sound is that it needs -5 volts. Now, although some of these machines can put out -5 volts, the other main part is that the speakers need to be non-crossed or non-amplified. They just need to be direct wired, just regular speakers. For example, this is just a regular surround sound speaker, and it's not amplified, and those just need to be wired up from the black and the red. And as you can see here, it's right there, I just have the black and the red wire just wired up there, and it plays fine. Now, I wound up doing a lot of different tests on it. The main reason why is because I have this Blast City here, and this Blast City is not putting out enough -5 volts. So anytime I plug this thing into the cabinet directly, I can't get the sound to come on. The picture will come on great, but no sound. So what I wound up doing is I went and picked up an old ATX power supply, and you can usually pick these up for really cheap. And in fact, you can probably find them, you know, in an old computer, or find them laying on the street. I mean, nobody really uses these so much anymore, so it was really cheap to pick up. And on the harness itself here, you'll notice I've already done some chopping and stuff. On the harness here, you'll have your 3.3 volts. The blue wire is -12. Black wire is going to be your ground. The green wire here, as you can notice, has been clipped. This grounded out with a regular ground wire will turn the power on. Now, this ATX power supply in the back here, this actually has an on-off switch, so I've already soldered the two wires together, the green wire and a ground wire, so I can turn it on from the back. More ground wires, all the black ones, and this white wire here, which is sometimes on some ATX power supplies and maybe on some other power supplies it's missing. It really depends on the year and the model of it. But this white one here, this is your -5 volts, and this one is really essential. With these power supplies, you can do almost anything with these. You know, people make super guns, people wind up using them to power a whole cab. Fantastic, you know, piece of equipment here. But this one actually has the -5 volts, so I chopped that off here. The red ones, these are your +5s, and on the other side here, yeah, basically you have the same kind of setup. So what I did is I had another JAMA harness, and I wound up soldering those wires up here. As you can see, the white one here, this is the -5. And by doing that, and then running the RGB from this harness here to a separate little adapter that I wound up having laying around, it was just a scrap piece of board, soldered up the RGB only. And with that, I was able to get the sound and the picture. And what I did with the sound wires is I took these two sound wires, the left and right, and I wired up two wires there. And for the first time, what I did is I just directly wired them up from the harness, and I just plugged them into the speaker. And as soon as I popped it on, I got sound. So it was really quick. There was no problems. I didn't have to flip the switch on and off a couple dozen times like I did with the neo-geo cab. And it works great now. So if you're thinking about trying to, you know, check some problems that you may be having with your sound boards on these Midway PCBs, you might want to try and use an ATX power supply and just hook it all up. Make sure that you have all of the wires hooked up. As you can see, I got the ground, I got the +5, this is the +12, -5, speaker wires, the RGB here, and the ground on the other side. and try and wire that up and just run 2 wires directly from this harness to a speaker. You know, this speaker here, just a regular surround sound speaker. It's 8 ohms and it works fantastic. So what I did after that is I wound up taking the 2 wires here and I just ran them from here to my little adapter. And that way it could put out the sound through the speakers in the Blast City, because the Blast City speakers here aren't powered. They're just direct wired as well. So figured I'd pop this on here and let you guys take a look at what I'm talking about, or at least hear what I'm talking about. And yeah, so right now the cab itself, if I turn the power on, this is going to light up the monitor. And nothing's gonna pop on here because all of the rest of the power that is controlling the board is being run through the ATX power supply. So once I hit the switch on that, let's flip the switch here. Now, as you can hear, the sound comes on, I mean, automatically. And this power supply here that's in this Blast City, it doesn't put out -5, and I was able to get it to put out just a little bit, and it was enough to power some of my other boards like my Kadash board and my Double Dragon board. But as far as powering these Midway boards, these are really, really picky pieces of equipment, so yeah, well, the battery's pretty dead. But as you can hear, it's playing fine. And sound's coming. And I still have my volume here in the cab, even though you don't need it because it's controlled automatically if you go through the dip switch settings. But this will play the sound every time. Whereas if I plug it into my other cab, 99% of the time it just doesn't want to fire on the first time. So it's something that you guys can try if you're thinking about trying to get some sound out of your Midway boards and having no luck at all. I was having no luck trying to find information on it as well, but by doing this little mod here, it works fantastic. You know, the controls right now are not wired up to the harness because the harness itself is just, I just wanted to check for the power. But you can essentially just wire up the wires for your kicks and your punches to whatever buttons you want to, and get a kick harness and pop that on there and you'll be ready to go. With these candy cabs it's a little bit difficult to get the sound to come on. It doesn't like to play the sound on any of my candy cabs, but as you can hear, it's playing the sound just fine. And it will do it every single time. So just something to take into consideration here if you guys are having any trouble, or if you just want to make sure that the soundboard is properly working. This is something you can do. You don't essentially have to have the RGB hooked up, but if you want to make sure that the picture is working as well, yeah, definitely I would recommend hooking it up. But yeah, just checking to see if the sound works on your boards. That's what I would recommend. Well, get an old ATX power supply. Make sure that it has the white wire on it, because that white wire is sometimes not added to some of these connectors. And if it doesn't have a white wire, that means it doesn't have the -5 volts. So if you do find an old power supply that does have a white -5 volts on it, wire it up. Make sure that you have the wiring correct. As you can see on this board here, what I have is I have the ground on the first 4 pins, and then on the next 4 pins after that I have the +5 volts. Then the next 2 pins after that, those are going to be connected to the -5, and then the pins next to that one are going to be the +12. And then finding your speaker wires, your speaker outs, those are going to be just simply wired to a regular speaker. And the next continuing wires here, those are for the RGB. And this is the start button and coin in button which I have wired up there, and then finally I have the ground wires on the ends. So just something to check out and try yourself if you're having any issues with sound trouble on Midway boards and you just want to check to see if they're working. But that's about all for me for right now. Like always, I'll put up another video here soon, so thanks for watching.
Round 1, fight!